So a little bit about cybersecurity and network access control and why they're so important, and then we'll talk about how they are related. So we're coming off of really not the tail end, but we're coming off of a huge BYOD boom, which saw a BYOD challenge and how to address that. And really on the tail end of that, the IoT explosion happened. So now on top of your managed devices and your BYOD devices, IoT devices are also something to contend with. Many different companies and different markets have taken to several different approaches to address this challenge. Layering in many different security vendors and products on the network has been one approach, but because of that, now there's an attempt to consolidate those because there's so many different security solutions on the network to address this. Security compliance is, of course, driving all of the spending and the person hours that are spent on this challenge. Small businesses, just as much as large enterprises, are very much affected by some of these challenges, and these attacks and vulnerabilities can be very serious. Small companies may not be able to mitigate these as much as large companies, and some companies could actually fail. So obviously the security requirements are there, they're well documented, and it's really more about what will you do to address those security requirements and how will that be implemented.
Thanks, Brett. You know, I've always thought of NAC as being a fundamental component of an effective cybersecurity for enterprises of all sizes, really, and certainly with the constant barrage of ever-advancing cyber threats facing us these days, a solid NAC approach seems particularly critical. I mean, as we've seen with the BYOD phenomenon, and now with the onslaught of IoT devices fully upon us and increasing daily, there are clearly more and more network-enabled devices being added to our environments every day, every week, every month, every year, no question. With that in mind, and for those who are perhaps less familiar with the subject, maybe we start out with answering the question, why do companies need NAC today?
Sure, and it's very well documented, whether it be a particular regulatory compliance or just a company's charter or their security goal, and part of their security framework that they want to mitigate risk and secure their network, why you actually need some kind of product to actually address these concerns. So, you know, some of these basic requirements and criteria really spread across multiple regulatory compliances. And these are really the core items that should be addressed and should always be part of any cybersecurity plan. So really, no matter what your industry and no matter what your goals are, you can have an overlap of all of the basic requirements that are going to be a solid foundation of a cybersecurity plan. So if you have just these basic controls in place, you have a much higher chance of mitigating risk and thwarting attacks just by doing the basics. So the question is, what kind of product is best suited to address these requirements? Really, network access control is very well suited to address all of the basic requirements. In fact, there is almost a one-to-one correlation between most basic network access control features and all of the core cybersecurity requirements that span across multiple regulatory compliances. Really, you want to make sure that you have control of all of your assets, whether they be hardware or software. Vulnerability awareness and management, of course, is important. Administrative privileges, and make sure that devices have the appropriate access based on the device and the user. And then endpoint security relative to hardware and software and extended, to other devices as well is important. And last but not least, after you implement that, you of course need to monitor that and then update your plans or your configuration. So NAC is really a perfect fit to meet these requirements, more so than any other one particular tool, like a vulnerability scanner or a patch management system or a SIM, etc. It really comes down to three primary steps or three core components or solutions to be able to implement some of these lower level core requirements. Surveillance and visibility is always the key component to be able to then control and then automate that environment. So network access control has these three blocks in its foundation, and used properly and deployed correctly, then you can avoid 85% of common attacks based on the Center for Internet Security Control surveys. And network access control is just a direct fit for this. So we're going to show you actually how, and we'll talk a little bit about network access control in general.